Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this ITProTV webinar. We will be live tweeting during the webinar at #ProsKnow. Have a question? Use the GoToWebinar question box throughout the webinar, and we will answer as many as we can at the end. You will receive a link to a recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. Questions not answered during the webinar will be answered on Twitter with the #ProsKnow. Now let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the ITProTV webinar series, live from the ITProTV studios. I'm your host, Cherokee Boos, and today we'll be discussing PowerShell to the people. And it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mike Roderick. Mike has over a decade of experience in IT training, and not only does he specialize as a system administrator in the Microsoft space, but he's also an edutainer right here at ITProTV. So what exactly is ITProTV? It's an IT skills development platform, and we call it binge-worthy IT learning because we offer an engaging way to learn and grow your career. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned IT pro, we've got courses to meet your needs, ranging from CompTIA, Cisco, Linux, Apple, Microsoft security, cloud, and more, all online and on demand. Check us out at itpro.tv. All right, Mike, let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to be talking about PowerShell to the people, like I mentioned. Now, I know Microsoft recently released PowerShell version 7 last week for preview. Is that what we're going to be talking about today?
Not yet. I mean, it's good to know that it's out there and that they are putting out this new version, which we need to be aware of, but we're going to stick with what's available for general release or to the general public for this demonstration anyway, because we know everything works.
That's always a plus,
sometimes
right?
with those previews, exactly, they can get a little kinky. That's why they're previews, right? So, but definitely if you're into it, go take a look at that, download that preview and see what's upcoming with PowerShell, because PowerShell 7 is going to add even more capabilities when it comes to cross-platform and module support that we were missing possibly in prior versions, so definitely worth a look. But again, it is still in preview, so keep that in mind, maybe not put it on your production machines. But we are going to talk about PowerShell in general. We want to take a look at the evolution of PowerShell, where it came from, where it's going. We want to talk about why we should bother learning it, if it's worth it, and we want to take a look at the question we always get is, when am I going to get certified in PowerShell, right? So we'll take a look at that concept as well. But let's start out. The question I get a lot, Cherokee, I'm sure you get this as well, is why should I bother learning PowerShell? It's just another one of these Microsoft command line utilities. I've seen them before. They come and they go. They're all okay. So this is just another one, right? And honestly, the answer to that is no, absolutely not. PowerShell is the way to administer machines in the future. It's the way Microsoft wants to go, and it's definitely worth your time to take a look at and to learn and invest the resources into becoming a PowerShell administrator, because it's going to help you in your career and out there in the real world as you manage these machines.
Well, this isn't just some fly-by-night type of situation. We're talking about our product. They've been investing and working on this product for years now. And I know it's PowerShell 7, but it almost seems like we're at like the 100th version here. So I think that Microsoft has made a large enough investment so that we as end users can see that it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not going anywhere. And when you look at Microsoft's plan, their strategy, what they're saying is that they're 100% committed to PowerShell. Everything that you can do administratively has to be able to be done through PowerShell. That's their motto. When they're designing, when they're developing, PowerShell first, which is a big change, right? It used to be graphical user interface. It's Windows for all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not called let's run Microsoft Text. It's Microsoft Windows. We want to do things in the GUI. That's what we're used to doing, and so that's where most of the development went in prior versions of Windows. But now it's kind of flipped. PowerShell first, and then the GUI is built on top of that. And honestly, most of your new graphical user interface-based tools are really just front ends for PowerShell. When you look at something like the Active Directory Administrative Center, when you double click on something, when you right click, you select new user in there, what's happening is it's executing a PowerShell command in the background. So whether you know it or not, you're already using PowerShell.
And one of the features that I think is really cool is with some of those graphical user interfaces, when you go and perform a certain command, sometimes it'll tell you at the bottom of that screen the actual equivalent of the PowerShell syntax. So it's almost like training wheels for PowerShell.
It is. It's fantastic. You look at you look at the Administrative Center and open up that PowerShell history. Take a look at what just happened when you created that new user. Because if you want to write a script, if you want to speed this process up, those are the commands you're going to need to use. And heck, Windows is writing it for you, so you're pretty sure that it's correct, right? It's just taking whatever you clicked on and it's converting it into that PowerShell command. Which brings us to another point. Another reason why we want to learn PowerShell is to automate things, is to speed things up, right? When we think about the GUI interface, the graphical user interface, you can click and you can make a new user. And let's say that making that new user takes you, just for round numbers, 5 minutes. If you're filling out a lot of fields and things like that, it could take you a few minutes to do. So there's really no way to speed that process up. You can try to click a little faster. You can try to type a little faster. But if it takes you 5 minutes to do something in the GUI and you have to do it 100 times, let's say you need 100 new user accounts, that's 500 minutes.
Even if you do finger exercises every single day, right?
Absolutely. It's just not going to get that much better. Maybe you shave it down to 490 minutes, or something like that. But if you were to write a script that could take a list of those names from a CSV file or something like that and create those accounts in a matter of minutes, all 100 of them, now we're talking efficiency, right? We're talking about power. That's where that PowerShell comes into play. So understanding, why we should learn PowerShell, because Microsoft is committed that PowerShell is the administrative tool of choice for Windows in the future. And as we're going to see in a little bit, not just Windows, right? We'll talk about that here in a second. So I definitely want to take the time and the effort to invest in learning PowerShell. And as Cherokee mentioned, great way to get started is to use the GUI and then look at those PowerShell history. Anytime you can go through a wizard and it says at the end of it, like when you're promoting a domain controller, right? At the very end, it says View Script. There's a button down there in the bottom, I think, right-hand corner. You can open that script up and you can see the PowerShell commands that are going to be executed. Copy that off, read through it, understand it, parse through it, modify it, use it on your next domain controller by just running the script, right? This is how you're going to start getting familiar and start learning PowerShell. So now that we've talked about why we really want to learn, and hopefully we've stressed the importance of learning PowerShell, let's talk about what it is. What is PowerShell? What makes it so much better than any other tool Microsoft has put out before? Because we've had other options to work with our servers from the command line or work with our operating systems from the command line. We've got our old school command prompt, MS-DOS based command prompt, right? Which is still around and still a viable tool to a certain extent. But it was a command line interface that allowed me to work with a system from the command line, but it really wasn't a scripting environment. Right? We could write some batch files. We could try to write some limited scripts. We had our Windows scripting host, or the WSH, which was a nice scripting environment, but it really wasn't a command line interface or a command line tool. And so these were two separate tools. And PowerShell kind of starts combining these concepts, where it is a command line interface where I can work with my systems, and I can also script very easy. I can start automating some of that process. And it gives me the ability to manage systems remotely, right? Which is a big plus when it comes to working from that command line, being able to manipulate remote systems and multiple systems at the same time. So command line shell or command shell scripting language, remotely manage these machines built on originally the .NET framework. We'll talk a little bit about that here in just a minute, about how that's changing in the background. But it does give us that ability to manipulate our systems remotely from that command line and generate scripts.
Now, one thing you and I were talking about before, which I think is pretty cool, we do see that unification of that language, where some of those tools you were mentioning before, you go into, like you had mentioned previously, NetSH or DISM, and you have to remember the syntax and where should I put my hyphens and my forward slashes and all that. So we have everybody on the same page here, right?
Absolutely. When you look at, as we were talking, like, is it a forward slash parameter or is it a dash parameter? Are those parameters case sensitive, like with NetSH versus ipconfig? It was all different. So you had to learn each utility independently. And there was no consistency, as you said. Help was sometimes there, sometimes it wasn't there. Could I get any help on a particular command about using that particular syntax? Output varied, right? Depending on who developed that utility, how it outputted to the screen could change from one utility to another. And the developer that was writing that utility had to deal with that, had to come up with a way to format the information that was coming back, right? All on the developer. With PowerShell, with that .NET framework, all of that's already there, right? The framework is laid in. You can write your own commandlets. You could go today and write your own commandlet, and you don't have to worry about how's this going to look on the screen? How am I going to output that? Because it's all part of the framework. And now some people tell you that that does limit you as a developer. Maybe that takes away some of your choices, but that's with most standards, right? We do have to, at some point, put some limitations there to make sure everything's compatible and we're consistent. And I think in the end, it makes for a much better system, all right? Now, so that's really what PowerShell is about being able to automate tasks, being able to remotely manage our machines on our network from the command line, being able to write those scripts. Right? And as you mentioned, Cherokee, this is PowerShell 7 seems like PowerShell 100. It's been around for quite some time. And initially, PowerShell was a Windows-only thing. Right? It was built on the .NET framework, which means it was only available on Windows-based systems. And let's take a look at my screen here. I'm going to pull up the original PowerShell or the current version of Windows PowerShell. I'm going to go ahead and give that administrative rights. And a couple of neat things in here, Cherokee. I see that Microsoft is actually putting a plug into the intro. Do you notice that? I don't know
Try
if
the
you've seen
new
this recently.
cross-platform PowerShell.
Right. It's also kind of scary that they can actually put advertisements right into my my PowerShell here on my. But anyway, who knows what update that came out in, and that's given us a hint of where we're going. Cross-platform PowerShell. But this what we're looking at right now is the original Windows PowerShell. It's the latest version of Windows PowerShell, I should say. Let me zoom back out, and we can find out. We can do a $, what is it? PS version table, and we can take a look, and we'll see this is currently my PS version is 5.1, right? That is the latest version of the Windows PowerShell, and you'll see PS Edition listed as desktop. All right. Again, based on the .NET framework, this is going to be a Windows-only platform. We also have now, and we can see right here, this cross-platform PowerShell. I'm sure this is not a surprise. It's not new. Everybody's been reading about this, looking into this. We now have PowerShell Core version 6.2. I'll go ahead and launch that as well, right on top of it here. And the first thing you'll notice is that I'm goofy and I like my ASCII
Hey, look,
art.
more advertising, subliminal advertising there.
How did ITProTV slip that into there to my command prompt? I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, a little goofy ASCII art there. But really what I want you to notice is I'm running both, right? This is one machine. I'm running Windows PowerShell and PowerShell Core side by side. So it's a great, I just want to make sure you're aware of that. You're not stuck with one or the other. And as you start to transition into PowerShell Core, which is where you need to be going, because if you look at Microsoft's website and you look at their instructions on how to install PowerShell, they will say, if you want to install the legacy Windows PowerShell, right, which is telling you that that is going away, right? It's already being flagged as legacy.
And it's really a smart idea to even think about with that cross-platform option, because if you know, hey, I can manage, I'm a sysadmin for the Windows space, but now I'm already familiar with PowerShell Core, I can take this same subset of knowledge, tweak it slightly to fit inside of a Linux realm or something like that. You've essentially just doubled your skill set there, so you are a more valuable asset, so why not?
Absolutely. Now you can say, look, I want more money.
That's right.
Or a better job or something. So we can run these side by side. And as I say Linux at the same time there, as we look at this, the big advantage of PowerShell Core is that, as Cherokee said, it's cross-platform, right? As we see from Microsoft's cross-platform PowerShell. Let me do a $PS version table on my PowerShell Core, and I want you to notice the difference here, right? You see it is version 6.2, so that is the latest version as of the shooting of this show. It is Core. PS Edition is actually listed there as Core versus desktop on my Windows PowerShell. So you're going to hear all kinds of different terms. You're going to see Windows PowerShell. Whenever they say Windows PowerShell, they're referring to the desktop version that is based on the .NET framework that is Windows only, which is why we have the word Windows out in front of it. When you see PowerShell Core, now they're referring to the cross-platform version, and this is based on the .NET Core 2.x at this time. That'll change as they release Windows PowerShell 7 will most surely be updated. But that is how we're going to denote the cross-platform version of PowerShell. We leave off the word Windows, and we've been putting the word Core on there, although I'll tell you with PowerShell 7, that's being dropped, right? Because now that is the PowerShell. The Windows PowerShell is becoming legacy, so there's no need to really differentiate between desktop and core. So they are going to drop the core version, core name. Well, at least that's what they're saying now. That could change, obviously. We know how Microsoft likes to change. But we'll probably lose that. So when you see PowerShell, you're going to be thinking about the core version. From what I've read, it'll still be PS Edition Core, just so that programmatically you can differentiate between those if you would need to, right? And I'll zoom back out there. So you can run them side by side. Other cool thing about PowerShell Core is it's open source, right? This is you can go out there and download this from GitHub. Anybody can get it. It's freely available. You can help it if you want to develop it. You can become part of the development process. It's really a pretty neat thing. You know, we're seeing a big sweeping change in Microsoft in this whole moving to more open communications, development, things like that. Absolutely love it. All right, now, so again, we'll take a look, and I'll show you how to install this on Windows, and we'll take a look at how to install it on Linux, right? Because that's that's one of the neater parts about PowerShell Core, is that it is cross-platform, not just Windows. Because it's based on that .NET Core, it will run on Windows. It will also run on Linux. Most of our Linux systems are going to be supported. It'll run on Mac OS X or OS, Mac OS, and even ARM to a certain extent. I think we can install it there as well. But what that means is Microsoft understands that when we manage our servers, when we manage our enterprise environment, it's not just Windows servers in there. They know that we have these heterogeneous environments, that we're going to have Linux servers, that we're going to have some Windows servers. And I need a tool that can manage all of them, not just one separate tool for another one. And that's where this really comes into play, right? It gives you that ability to do that cross-platform management.
All right, Mike, you've got me sold, but what really sets PowerShell apart here? Can we see it in action?
Absolutely. You know, there are a couple things that I want to point out that really set PowerShell above and beyond Microsoft's previous go-arounds at command line, utilities, and automation and scripting. And if you take a look at my screen, I've made my font a little bit bigger. I had a couple people commenting it was a little hard to read, so hopefully that is better. I want to show you just some very basic commands. You know, and one of the things, again, that makes PowerShell so powerful is as you're learning it, they make it very easy to find the commands. Let's say I want to work with services, but I don't know PowerShell, and I don't know what commandlets are available to work with services. I can simply do a git-command and then use some wildcards and do something like *-service. And I'll hit enter. And there we go. I get a list of commandlets, and those are commands we use in PowerShell that I can use to manipulate or work with services. And they're really pretty self-explanatory. When you look at them, git-service, PowerShell commandlets are always verb-noun, action you're going to perform, what it is you're going to perform that action on. Git-service, I can pretty much guess that's going to go and get some information about a particular service or all services, not really sure, but that's a good start, right?
It is a good start, especially if you're just starting out and learning, or if you're like me and you're kind of forgetful and you're like, what was that again?
Yeah, exactly. What was that? I know part of it. Just throw some asterisks on either end of it and see what PowerShell can do. And it doesn't stop there. Like, let's say git-service sounds like the command I want, but I don't know how to use that command. Well, that's easy. We can do a git-help and then the commandlet name, git-service. And I'm going to get help on that particular service. There's the name of it, how we go up and what it does, and then the syntax for how to use that particular command, which is fantastic. Now, if you're from the Linux world, you're like, yeah, those are man pages. We've had them forever. Yeah, not in Windows. We're excited about this, right? We really like that. And it doesn't stop there. You can see if I want more detailed information, like examples, I can simply add the word example to the end of that. And now I'm going to get actual commands. If you do this, this is what it's going to do. Do you want to sort services by property value? Here's another example. Get services that begin with a search string. Oh, look, that's how you do that wildcard thing. So lots of help baked right in to Windows PowerShell. So easy to find the commandlets, easy to return information about the commandlets. And then, most of these commandlets, almost all of them are going to return objects, which allow me to even further manipulate them. All right. Now, again, I know we've been selling PowerShell a lot here, and hopefully at this point you're like, wow, PowerShell really is the way to go. It's where I see administration going in the future. How do I get started, Mike? What are we going to do? Well, the first thing you're going to need to do is get PowerShell installed, right? Now, Windows PowerShell came in Windows 10, and most of our modern Windows versions, operating systems, our server operating systems, our client operating system, they have Windows PowerShell. But remember, Windows PowerShell 5.1 is now considered legacy. If you go out to Microsoft's site, it'll say, if you want to install the legacy Windows PowerShell, this is what you got to do. All right, so you don't need to install it if you're running Windows because it's already there, and you can't install it on other operating systems because it's based on the .NET framework. So we're good to go there. What we need to see is, how do I get PowerShell Core? How do I get that on my systems? How do I get it on my Windows machine? How do I get it on my Linux machines? Right? How do we get started with all this? Because that's the great thing about it is cross-platform. It works on all our different operating systems, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. All right. So if you're going to do this on a Windows system, we're simply going to download it from GitHub. It's open source, as we said earlier. It's freely available. So I'm going to jump over to a Windows 10 machine here. I'm going to open up a browser, and we're going to go to GitHub and PowerShell and see what we got. Should be one of the very first links. We'll get PowerShell. Right? And I'm clicking a little bit fast there. Just simply use your search engine of choice, Bing, hopefully, right? I'm just kidding about that. And look for PowerShell. And this is actually not the one I want.
I feel like I should throw a disclaimer that Microsoft is not paying you anything to like promote these tools. This is just out of your passion here.
Right. And I actually followed the wrong link. Let's do that again. PowerShell. And I went out to the there we go. Sorry, a little misclick there. I ended up in Microsoft Docs getting information about PowerShell. I wanted to get to the repository where you have PowerShell available to download. And all you'll scroll down, you'll see PowerShell, and here's the different versions. You can download Windows 6, if I can't zoom in just a wee bit here. All right, here I can see I've got 32-bit, 64-bit versions. You've got the stable version, which is going to be the 6.2 that we've been talking about. As Cherokee mentioned, 7 is in preview, so you could go ahead and, if you want to live on the edge, you want to see what it's all about, go ahead and download that one. But simply download the appropriate version. I'll go ahead and save that. Shouldn't take too long. It's not very large. And then once that finishes its little scan, we can simply run that MSI. So just like installing any other software, and it's going to play nicely. It's going to install right next to Windows PowerShell. It's not going to cause a problem. It is taking forever to do its little security scan. So maybe we'll come back and check on that in just a minute. Oh, there we go. It just finished. As soon as I said I was going to leave, it decides to finish. All right, so now I'm going to go open that folder. There is that MSI file there. And I'm just going to double click on that to start the installation process. And there's our good old PowerShell installation wizard. And I'm going to use the default. It's going to install to my program files directory. I do have a few choices here, and I'm sure that's really small. I don't have my Zoom in installed on this particular machine, but it's asking me, do I want to add PowerShell path to environment variable? Absolutely. It makes it easier. Register Windows event logging manifest, enable PowerShell remoting. Right? I can go ahead and turn that on. Add open here context menu to Explorer. So I can right-click and Explorer and open up a PowerShell prompt to that directory. Always handy. I'll click Next and then Install, and it's going to begin the installation process. I'll give it that administrative rights. We'll let that finish. I'm going to close my browser in the background just to kind of tidy things up as that's finishing the install. And there we go. It's finished. I'm going to choose Launch PowerShell, and I'll click Finish. And there we go. Ta-da. We now have, and I will bump up the font in here real quick so you can see what's going on. If I do a $PS version table, you can see I now have 6.2 Core installed on this machine. So easy, right? To get Core installed on a Windows machine, simply go out to GitHub, download the latest stable release, run that MSI. Now, if you want to install this on a Linux machine, and I'm going to minimize some of my windows here. All right, so we're going to jump over to my CentOS box here. We'll get PowerShell Core installed on Linux. Doesn't that sound exciting? I'm going to fire up a terminal, and we'll bump up that font just a wee bit. I know that's a little small. And I've actually cheated. I've got some of the text pre-typed so that I don't have to sit here and show you my wonderful typing skills. I am going to raise my credentials here. It's going to help me out. I'll say type in my password. All right, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this, and you'll be able to read this once I paste it in. Hopefully. There we go. So what I've done is curl, and then the URL. Basically, I'm adding the repository. The repository from Microsoft is going to allow me to download and install core. That ran a little faster than I wanted to, but you can see curl, and then the URL, and then I've teed that up to Etsy yum repos.d/Microsoft.repo. I'll throw these in somewhere in notes when we put up for this webinar.
So you're essentially grabbing that package from the internet. You need a connection there.
Exactly. You do need to go out and make sure you're connected. And then once you've added that repository, I've got my command down here to install PowerShell. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to go through the process. And you can also, there's a couple of different ways you could do this. It's just the way I chose to do it. You can download the package, you can use your package manager to install this. There's a couple of different ways. I kind of like adding the repo. To me, it makes it a little bit easier to make sure I've got the current version and doing updates later, but everybody's got their own way of doing things. But that was it. It was that easy, right? If I clear my screen and I type in pwsh, yeah, I am now at a command or a PowerShell prompt. You see that PS out there? I can do git dash, process, for example, right? I can start running my PowerShell commands. I mean, how easy was that?
That was pretty cool.
Right? That was it. Very, very simple. All right, so now we've got PowerShell installed, PowerShell Core installed on Windows. We've also got PowerShell Core installed on one of our Linux machines. Actually, I have a couple Linux machines. The other one I've already installed. If we're going to start doing cross-platform management, you're basically going to use SSH or OpenSSH to connect into these Linux boxes to do your remote administration. So I do want to show you how to get that set up as well. So let's take a look there. On my Linux machine, I'm going to use Nano. Use whatever text editor you want. And we need to modify, if I can spell there, we're going to go into Etsy, SSH, SSHD _config. Right. And the line I need to make a change to, page down here, there's a couple of them. I want to make sure, one, that password authentication is set to yes, depending, right? You might use certificates and keys. I'm using passwords in my case, so I'm going to change that. And if you're in a little test environment as you're getting practicing with this, might be the easiest way to do it. I also need to add, and we'll show you down here, another subsystem. So we're going to modify this. You can see me trying to click. I'm a Windows guy, right? We're going to do subsystem. And then this is going to be PowerShell. And the path for that is going to be user/bin/pwsh SSHS no logo. What am I going to do? Yeah, no logo. And no profile. And so I'm going to add that line in there to our config file. I will exit out of that. And I'm going to save that, overwrite that, right? Should be good there. And then now that I've made that change, I want to do a service and SSHD restart. I'm going to restart that service to get those changes to kick in. That's going to allow password authentication in my case and add that new subsystem. And then I'm going to exit out of all of that. And we'll go ahead and close that. And I need to save it. All right, so now to prove what's going on, I'm going to jump back over to PowerShell Core here.
Okay, Mike, but to clarify, we're on the Windows machine now.
We are. So we're back on my Windows 10 machine. We're at PowerShell Core. I've also already installed SSH on my Windows machine. I can show you that. I think I just ran that command recently. You could do a git-windows capability. You can also use the GUI. If you go into your add additional features or manage optional features, you want to install the OpenSSH client, which on Windows 10 should already be installed. You also want to do the OpenSSH server, which probably won't be installed, but it'll be available. Or you can do you can add -Windows capability if you want to use PowerShell, GUI, either way. And then you want to start the SSHD service on your Windows machine. Change that startup type to automatic if you plan on using it all the time. And also make sure there's a firewall rule, get-net. I'll show you this rule real quick. Firewall rule, and its name has, this is where love my wildcards, has SSH in it. I don't remember the name.
Something like that.
Something like that, right? And there you can see Open SSH server in TCP, and I can see that it is enabled there, and it is set to allow, right? So that's going to allow me to go back and forth if I was coming from the Linux side and wanted to remotely manage a Windows machine using PowerShell, right? So once all of that is done, now it should be a matter of just making a connection to that Linux box. Let's try it out, right? We're going to do a new -ps session, and I'm going to do a -host name. It is a little different connecting to a Linux box versus a Windows machine. With a Linux box, you're going to use the host name command rather than the computer name. And in my case, I'm going to use the IP address just because that's going to be easier. And I've got to remember what that IP address was, Cherokee. It was a 18.76.
I love how you asked me like I have any clue.
Oops.
Yeah, that's great.
And I just hit the wrong key there. Let me wait for that to finish
Okay.
and error out.
But it's good. You could also use the name of the PC if you knew the name. And even if you have Hyper-V installed, there's a really cool way that you can use PowerShell here to kind of bypass that networking stack and just go straight to the VM bus, which is actually faster for the most part because you're not moving anywhere. So if you're running Hyper-V in PowerShell, that's another really cool benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah, speed is always good. I had to kill that, and it was because I only typed in part of the IP address and actually hit enter. So it was trying to connect. So I killed that. Let's do that again. -host name, and the IP address was going to be 172.18.76.3, and then -username. And my username on my Linux box over there was mroderick. It'll prompt me for my password, and hopefully everything goes well. I have a new session, right? And so now I could enter that session, enter -ps session. I could do a -id, ID. What does it give me? A 6 over there. And there I am. If you take a look at my prompt, I am now connected. PowerShell, look, home/mroderick. If I have a uname, 1-A. Right here you can see I'm connected to my CentOS box.
So you're managing a Linux machine from a Windows machine. Did you ever think that was
Never. Absolutely not, right? I can do a git process, and I'm seeing the processes that are running on that Linux machine. I can do git commands to see what commands are available. If we had more time, we could start adding more sessions. We could do invoke commands, and I can apply commands across platform, right? If I have more than one session, I can do we could do an invoke command into a get session and apply a single command across Windows and Linux machines. It's a pretty bright future when it comes to administering these heterogeneous environments. So hopefully that gives you a really good look at where PowerShell is going and why you want to start now and learning PowerShell. We've got a lot of great courses in our library here that deal with PowerShell from Adam, from Don, from Cherokee, from myself. So take advantage of those. The last thing I want to leave you with, this is another question we get all the time, is when am I going to get certified in PowerShell, right? And unfortunately, as of now, everything that I've read coming out of Microsoft says no time soon, right? Because remember, Microsoft is changing their certification process. We've done shows on this. We've talked about how they're going to role-based certifications, not technology-based. You're not getting certified in Server 2019. You're not getting certified in a technology like PowerShell. Those are just the technologies that you use to accomplish your role. If you're a certificate administrator or an Active Directory domain administrator, Azure administrator, PowerShell is one of the tools that you need in your belt to perform that job. So they expect you to know PowerShell. You will need to know it to pass most of the exams, but you're not going to get certified in PowerShell, right? So just understand that at this point, at least, there probably isn't going to be a certification based on PowerShell because that's a technology, not a role, and Microsoft is shifting to more role-based certifications. They might shift back tomorrow, and you can say, Mike, you're completely wrong. But as of now, we don't see any kind of PowerShell certifications coming out from Microsoft.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that, Mike. But we do have to go ahead and open the floor up for some questions now. And it looks like our first questions come through. We have Sam from Nottingham in the UK asking, do I have to learn C# or .NET framework to be proficient in PowerShell?
That's a great question, Sam. And the answer is no. Thank goodness, right? Because I know I'm not very proficient at that. And no, you don't. That's the advantage of PowerShell. It is built on that framework, and it does take advantage of those classes in .NET Framework, .NET Core, which is great. And you can start getting into some of that, but you don't need to. That's the beauty behind PowerShell, is it hides all that complexity. We use our simple commandlets to interact with it, and really there's at least in my experience, I've had very little need to actually dive into the underlying framework. So great question.
Yeah, and we actually have another great question here. I think you'll really like this one, Mike. Zach from Syracuse, New York asks, how do you make the ASCII art appear in PowerShell? That was cool, and they could use it for their company. Could be used for my company logo, is what they say.
Yeah, my little geeky factor there. One, you have to obviously obtain the ASCII art, and you can go online and you can find several different websites that will let you upload an image and convert it into ASCII art. So that would be your first step. And I tried several different ones. Not all of them were as good. So play around with a few different ones. Get your ASCII art. And then if you join me on my screen here, you're just simply adding it to your PowerShell profile. So I had gone, let me open up File Explorer, take a look in my documents. And for the PowerShell core, right, underneath PowerShell, not Windows PowerShell, that'd be my profile for Windows PowerShell. PowerShell core is the PowerShell folder. And let me zoom out and I'll edit that. And let me just open it up with Notepad, actually. You'll be able to see it easier. And it simply starts out with this $block equals at open quote. And then paste in your ASCII art. And then end your quote. And put another at symbol. So it's $block equals at symbol, open quote, ASCII art, close quote, at symbol. And then this line right here is what displays it on the screen. Right-host. And just that $ variable, or that variable $ block. So easy enough there. Thanks for asking.
At least someone recognized, your little geekiness factor there.
Yeah,
so it
right?
was cool. Thanks.
It is fun.
Okay. Next question here. Let's see. Jose from Canada asks, is the help functionality only available with PowerShell Core?
Great question there, Jose. And the answer is no. You can use that on either Windows PowerShell or PowerShell Core. If you join me again on my screen here, I could do a get dash help, let's see, get dash service. All right, so this is on my regular PowerShell or Windows PowerShell, and then we can do that same command, get dash help, get dash service, do that on PowerShell Core as well. So either one, both of them support that fantastic help file system they've got built in.
Can you zoom in for 1 second just
Sure.
to make sure they can see that?
Absolutely.
So I know I'm.
Oops, and let me zoom out and I'll scroll that right. So there was the command on the PowerShell Core.
Perfect.
And then on normal PowerShell, same command, no difference, and you basically get the same results. And you want to update your help as well occasionally to fill that out. The first time you run get help, you might get a message that says unable to find help files or displaying very limited help, in which case you just run update-help, and it will reach out to Microsoft and pull those files down to your machine so that you can get the things like the examples that I showed you, and the more verbose help will only happen after you've updated your help files. It doesn't come with all that by default, saves a little space on your drive.
Okay, this next question, it's actually two questions from two individuals, Lee from Maine, and then Lonnie. I'm not sure where Lonnie is from, they didn't specify, but they're basically the same question. They say, is there a PowerShell core for ISE?
The answer would be no for that one. Microsoft is doing away with the ISE. Visual Studio Code is really their replacement for that. Visual Studio Code is a fantastic text editor, freely available from Microsoft. If you haven't played with it, make sure you go grab that, download that from Microsoft, get that installed. It's what I use to create all of my show notes here. Most of our show notes are done in Markdown, but it also supports most of your programming languages. You can get extensions to support JSON and Ruby on Rails and all PowerShell and all these different languages, and you can actually get color-coded support in there. And also, like I said, with PowerShell, that's where you're going to write your PowerShell scripts. In fact, what you'll see is once you install Visual Studio Code on your machine, it will become the default. If you right-click on a PS1 file and try to open it, it'll open in Visual Studio Code by default. So that's the replacement for that Windows PowerShell ISE. But from what I've read, they have no plans on supporting or redoing the ISE for PowerShell Core.
Okay, great. Yeah, I use Visual Studio Code as well, so thank you for that, Mike. Nate from Fort Collins, Colorado asks, how do you keep PowerShell versions up to date? Does it automatically update through Windows Update? Thanks.
Great question, Nate. And yes and no. right? Like Windows PowerShell will update through Windows Update, but that's going away. With PowerShell on Windows, the way to update it currently is to go back to Git and download the latest version and install it. I don't know of a way to automatically update it through, and that's not to say there isn't. I just don't know of any way to update it through the operating system or through PowerShell Core. So just go download the latest version. I see that changing. If I was going to get out my crystal ball, and I would say once Core becomes a part of the next version of Windows, whatever that is, 2003 or what have you, I would think they would probably include that in their Windows updates. As far as the Linux side of things go, it's going to be sudo yum update PowerShell. Let me make sure, sudo yum update PowerShell. Although that can change based on the version of Linux that you're running. In CentOS, the one I was running, you would just do a yum update PowerShell, and it'll reach out. If you've added that repository, right? If you're doing this through package management, it might be a little different. So again, something you'll have to research. Take a look at Microsoft Docs. They got really good instructions on different flavors of Linux and the slight difference in the commands you would use to install and update. But as far as CentOS, what we were looking at on the show, it's simply sudo yum update PowerShell, and it'll reach out to that repository and pull the latest version and update it. So that's pretty nice.
All right, great. Next question. Here we have Charlie from Rotterdam asking, is Azure PowerShell the same thing?
Azure PowerShell, it's slightly different, and there's different ways we can look at that. So when you say Azure PowerShell, there's an Azure module, if I can slow down and speak correctly, that I can install in PowerShell that gives me access to new commandlets that I can use to manipulate and work with Azure resources. But then there's the Azure CLI, which is slightly different. And Cherokee, I'll actually throw that one back to you because I know you've done a lot of work with that recently in our Azure show. So would you say they're the same, different? How would you answer that?
Are they? The functionality would be the same. It's just how underneath the hood that would be different. So with Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell, you're accessing them via the browser. And what actually happens is when you're logged into the Azure portal, you've already authenticated. So you don't need to have that extra step happen, whereas you would have to do that and authenticate separately if you were running the Azure or the Azure module inside of PowerShell, like on your desktop version. And in Azure Cloud, in Cloud Shell, it's literally spinning up a container and then you're running it off of that container. So it's a little bit different underneath the hood, but the same functionality is there, and you can even work on Linux systems with Azure CLI. So it gives you a little flexibility, and Microsoft recommends using that Azure PowerShell because it keeps everything up to date and you don't have to keep installing modules if they're changing and updating things. So it's a good option there. Yeah, so either way, whatever suits your needs.
And I tell you, it changes so fast. It is nice to have a way to keep those up to date and not have to worry about, do I have that latest version? Do I have the correct version of that particular module? It can be challenging sometimes. But everything's in a state of flux right now. It's all new. It's slowly settling down. And I think once we see a final transition into PowerShell, hopefully we'll eliminate some of the choices and we'll focus in on one particular tool.
Okay, we have a question here from Sawan asking, does PowerShell allow you to import Azure and Office 365 modules or even Power CLI? So that kind of piggybacks off of our question that we just answered. So hopefully that answers your question because yes, you can install the Azure module, but there are also other modules I've seen for many different types of functionality. It really just depends on what it is you're trying to do. And I didn't mean to answer the question for you, Mike.
No, that's perfectly fine because I know you've done a lot of work with Azure recently, as I said, preparing for those shows, and I have not. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Okay, so those were all great questions. And if we didn't get to your question, just know that we will be coming back to answer those on Twitter with the hashtag #ProsKnow. So keep your eye out for that. And if you like what you saw here today, you might want to take a look at an ITProTV membership. You can check out a free membership, no credit card required, with access to select courses in our daily live feed. You can also get a full membership that provides full access to the course library with or without practice tests and virtual labs. And just because you're with us today, you can use code webinar30 for 30% off all personal plans. But if you're on a team, you'll want to check out the business page, which offers a tour of the pro portal used to maximize your team's investment in training. And again, that's going to be itpro.tv/business. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've been your host, Cherokee Boos.
And I'm Mike Roderick.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us today. You will receive a link to a recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. All the questions we didn't get to will be answered via Twitter at #ProsKnow. Remember that coupon code is webinar30. See you back here for the next IT Pro TV webinar.